All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for being with us today to remember Barry Glick. We're all here because Mr. Glick touched our lives. He had a huge impact on his friends, his relatives, and especially his students. Not many people are born to teach, but Mr. Glick was. And here we are, many of us, his students, gathering 30, 40, 50 years after sitting in his classroom to share memories and try to express how much he meant to us. We have a big program today, so let's get started. But before we do, a few notes. First, if you wouldn't mind, please mute your computer. We also suggest that you view on Zoom using speaker view. And if you can, please write your names and connection to Mr. Glick for your account. Please remember to silence your cell phones, your dogs, and your children. Bathrooms are located in your homes, so you know where those are. Good luck. And if you would like to make a pledge for the Barry Glick Fund during the celebration, please email at glickfund@gmail.com, and we'll remind you about this and give you various ways and opportunities to donate as we go through our program today, and then again at the very end. Now I'd like to introduce John Hum. John graduated from Brightwood Elementary School, class of 1976, and married Christine Lim Hum, class of 1982. They have two children, Kirk and Kira, who both graduated from Brightwood as well. John shares a military bond with Mr. Glick. He served 28 years in the US Navy. And now, John will lead us through the national anthem.
Left face. Prepare arms.
The military phonetic alphabet uses 26 code words to represent each letter of the alphabet. It is used by military and civilians alike as a means to eliminate miscommunication, a trait that Mr. Glick highly regarded and practiced. In honor and tradition of Mr. Glick, we will use it today in a roll call of alumni he taught at Brightwood. Although all classes are not represented from his 35 years of teaching, we will start with alumni from his first class of 1972 and end with his last class of 2007 to signify we are ready to proceed with the program. Class of 1972, sound off.
Alpha.
Bravo.
Charlie.
Delta.
Echo.
Foxtrot.
Golf.
Hotel.
India.
Juliet.
Kilo.
Lima.
Mike.
November.
Oscar.
Papa.
Quebec.
Romeo.
Sierra.
Tango.
Uniform.
Victor. Whiskey.
X-ray. Yankee.
Zulu.
Mr. Glick, Brightwood School, all present or accounted for, sir.
Okay, carry on with the meeting.
That was great. Thank you, John. Now I'd like to introduce Bill Yee. Bill and Barry became friends and colleagues when they both taught social science to 7th and 8th graders in the Alhambra Unified School District. Their friendship continued when Bill became a Brightwood parent and his two sons, Derek and Colin, became Mr. Glick's students.
Thank you, everybody. Am I on?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. So, what a great tribute to Mr. Glick that all of you shown up at this virtual meeting. I was honored to call Barry both a friend and colleague, and he taught both our boys and had a profound impact on their lives. After his retirement, we had frequent phone calls on how his life and my life were going. We would discuss everything from current affairs, history, to our love of teaching. Barry would visit and dine with us on his trips back to LA. He and Jean had an open invitation to visit the Glick estate in North Carolina. I only regret that we never did. I still have not gotten over the shock of losing Barry so soon. And Lisa and I, of course, the boys miss him so much. So here's a short bio of Mr. Glick. The three Glick siblings were born at the same hospital, Beth Israel in New York City. Barry was born December 6, 1941. He would note the irony of his birth before a historical date in American history. All three were delivered by the same doctor. Barry's father, Joseph, came from Romania in 1920. He was a tailor and a presser in the garment district. He had a sister, Pearl, and a brother, Nathan. His dad died when he was 57. His mother, Rose, was born on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. She had two brothers, Bernard and David. She died at 68. Grandma Tilly was born in Ostrover, Poland in 1883 and immigrated to Chicago to meet her fiancé, also from Poland in 1899. They relocated to the Lower East Side in the 20s. She died in 1977 at the age of 94. The Glick family lived with the grandparents until Barry was born, and the family moved to Lincoln Place, Crown Heights, Brooklyn in 1941. They all went to the same public high school in Crown Heights, PS 167, and vacationed every summer in the same town, Parksville in the Catskills. The family then moved to Springfield Avenue, Queens in the mid-1950s. Grandma Tilly lived with them and had a great impact on Barry and his brothers. She influenced their ethics and their love of country. Barry's parents insisted they play an instrument. One brother played the accordion, Noel the trumpet, and Barry the clarinet. They often played together. Barry Glick was a legendary teacher at Brightwood School in Monterey Park. He was tough, but had rigorous standards. In his 36 years at Brightwood, he had a profound effect on several generations of Brightwood students, many of whom are in this Zoom broadcast today. Barry was a retired United States Army colonel and a native New Yorker, and you could always tell that he never lost that accent. He was a dedicated educator who provided experiences for his students, both inside and outside the classroom. He took students to trips to Europe, introduced them to opera and symphony. Astro Camp was the highlight for many of his 7th grade students. He sponsored the safety patrol and worked with the PTA to enhance the educational program at Brightwood. In retirement, Barry and his wife, Jean, moved to a community in North Carolina. It was, in quotes, retirement. Barry continued to have an impact. In retirement, he could not get teaching out of his system. For 14 years, he became a requested substitute teacher in one of the surrounding school districts. He did not just want to be someone who babysat students for a day. Instead, He created a storehouse of videos, PowerPoint presentations to enrich the students in the classes where he was a substitute. He continued to inspire students with his passion for teaching. Unfortunately, Barry was killed on February 16th during a tornado in Ocean Isle Beach, North Carolina, that destroyed his home. He left us too soon and will be missed.
All right. I believe now we are moving on to a video clip. This was created by Hubert Fang, and it's a video of Mr. Glick reenacting a science class. And this was for a Brightwood class of 1973 reunion. If you never had the pleasure of seeing Mr. Glick teach, this might give you a small taste of what it was like.
My name is John Hum. I was a student of Mr. Glick in Brightwood class of 1976. Many may have remembered him as an influential teacher, utilizing unique approaches to impart knowledge to his students. Others may have thought of him as a strict disciplinarian. Both characterizations are true, but not all may have known that in addition to his many years of teaching at Brightwood, he also concurrently served a 30-year career in the United States Army. In 1965, Barry H. Glick was a distinguished graduate and commissioned an Army officer through Reserve Officer Training Corps from the City College of New York. His first training and duty assignments were at the Infantry Officer Basic and Army Missile Munitions course, while serving as a training officer in the 3rd Battalion, 3rd Brigade at Fort Ord. In his mid-career, he attended Command and General Staff College and completed courses as a National Security Manager and Public Affairs Officer. In later years, he attended the Army War College and earned a master's degree in business management at the University of Laverne. His duty assignments included material and executive officer of the 139th Ammunition Battalion, weapons maintenance officer, and material management officer of the 311th Support Brigade. He finished his career with duty assignments as the commandant of the 62 22nd Reserve Forces School and commander of the 63 25th IMA Detachment. Colonel Glick earned numerous military decorations and commendations, including Meritorious Service Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, Army Commendation Medal with oak leaf cluster, Army Achievement Medal, National Defense Service Medal, and Armed Forces Reserve Medal. He retired from military service in 1995 with the rank of full colonel. Almost all of his distinguishing characteristics he employed in the classroom were a direct reflection of traits he learned in the military, including discipline, duty, respect, selfless service, critical thinking, organization, and persistence, among many others. But above all, it was his strong character and passion towards his students and their well-being to encourage the love of learning that I thought truly made him a remarkable person and teacher. Thank you for your service, Colonel Glick, on behalf of the United States Army and your countless dedicated students. You will be truly remembered and greatly missed by all.
Okay, that was great. I think that's the first time I've ever seen Mr. Glick without a mustache. That one picture. That was beautiful. Thank you for doing that, Bill. I'm sorry, John. And now let's go to that video clip of Mr. Glick teaching. Here it comes.
First of all, I want everyone to sit down and be quiet before we get started, because I have a couple of things that I need to talk to you about. Please, no talking. All right. Now let's talk about, see the date? I hope you have your date on your brain diagram. First of all, your brain diagram, those of you that still have it, I want you to take it out and take a look at it, because I'm kind of a little disappointed in how you did that diagram. So I'm going to come around to each of you again and have to see if you should get a check or a check plus, and some of you will get a check minus, and others of you, I know you're out there, are going to get a do-over. So let's take a look. Get out your brain diagram. I'm going to come around to each table and I'm going to check it out and see if you did a good job or not. Okay. There is some, I was just looking over the list here and I was looking at some students who owe me work. And where is Carl? Carl Middlemas? Can you come up here? You need to turn your work into Hubert because Hubert will give it to me. You still owe me some of, I think you owe me the brain diagram. I don't think you've ever accomplished it. Is Carl out there? I want someone to make sure that we talk to Carl before he gets a chance to go back to Arizona. Okay. Anyway, I hope I sounded, I don't know if I sounded that way in 1971 or not, but I had the opportunity of being at Brightwood after that till 2006. So I spent 36 years at Brightwood. And when I think back of your class in 1971, it was a very special year for me because I had been at Brightwood 1 year, but I was never intending, I don't know if you knew this, but I was never intending to stay at Brightwood. What I was intending to do was to go back to New York City and not come back at the end of that first year. For you, those of you who don't know, I was living in Hollywood. I was living in a boarding house. I had no attachments whatsoever to Los Angeles. And then at the end of that first year, a student gave me a record called I Am, I Said by Neil Diamond. And it said about caught between two shores, LA and New York. And to me, I realized that New York wasn't my home, as it says in the record, and that LA would be my home. And then when I came back to Brightwood, I knew it would be forever. And I really felt that way. And you were the first class that I knew it would be for the long run. And you were very, very special. You were very advanced, very mature, very sophisticated. You loved the same music I loved. You were still into the Beatles. We were able to run the school newspaper. We had some discussions about mental health, about life. And then I realized what I always wanted to do. And remember, I'm just 30 years old myself. And my growing up in my direction was you. You were what I wanted. And so I wanted to pass on to you some of the things to make you a better person. I used to tell you, don't worry, you're going to be older one day, and you're going to have a job, and you're going to have a career, and you have to prepare yourself for later life. And here we are.
I'm so glad we're getting to hear and see Mr. Glick talk. I could listen to it all day. It's not as scary as it was, though. I just want to make clear to anyone who wasn't there, it was much scarier than that. Maybe it's being in 7th grade. Anyway, all right, we have some tributes coming up. I'll introduce all the speakers and then we'll hear the tributes. The first speaker is my brother, John Haddam. John graduated from Brightwood in 1979. He was on the Honor Patrol. And if you know Mr. Glick, you know what that is. And then he attended Alhambra High School and Cal State LA. He currently works as a supervisor at the National Labor Relations Board. John is inspired every day by his family, his wife Blanca and their 3 sons, Will, Gabriel, and Paul, all of whom went to Brightwood. After graduating Brightwood, John kept in touch with Mr. Glick, even visiting him and Jean in North Carolina. Next up, we'll hear from Victor Lee, a friend of mine. We're both Brightwood graduates from class of 1980. Victor was a member of Safety and Honor Patrol. And after leaving Brightwood, his friendship with Mr. Glick continued into adulthood. We're going to hear that a lot. Victor currently lives in the San Francisco Bay Area with his wife, 8-year-old daughter, and her Alaskan Cleek-eyed puppy. He's worked 30 years in technology, sales, and most recently began his 12th year at Intel. And then finally, we'll hear from Colin Yee. He is a Brightwood graduate, class of 2007. And although Colin is a great San Francisco Giants fan, He currently works for the Los Angeles Dodgers as a radio producer and broadcaster.
Barry, I want to thank you for all you've done for me over the years. For 43 years, you never stopped teaching and supporting me. In the 7th grade, you taught me and other students how to work like adults. It was really hard, and sometimes it was scary, but it made everything after that so much easier for us. Let me show you something. I still have my notebook from the 7th grade. This was important. You had to keep it really straight. It was very official. And at the beginning of the year, I was out for a week sick, and my brother went to collect my homework from you, and you wrote a note in my official notebook, and he brought it home. My brother brought it home to me. And this is what you wrote. Dear John, this is an official notice. I need you to come back to school. My windows are left open. My door isn't locked. Students stay in my room too long before recess. The consumer committee is falling apart. Journalism is missing one of its best reporters. In fact, it's boring in school without you. Hurry back, Mr. Glick. That made me get better really fast. I thought that was really extraordinary. And like I said, there was a lot of work in your class, but we did have some fun. I remember a holiday party where it consisted of not cake, no punch, just music, and it was you playing the clarinet. And before you played, with a single spotlight on you, you told us, if you like the music, if you don't like the music, you can sit there quietly. And if you like the music, you can clap, but only with your two pinkies. So at the end of your performance, there were 30 sets of pinkies in the classroom clapping for you. It was a great party. And when I think back over the years, I think about all the opportunities you gave students to shine when they were in your class. Like I said, there was a student newspaper and Safety and Honor Patrol. Honor Patrol was really interesting. I'm not a pack rat, but I've got a souvenir from Honor Patrol. It's the jacket, and it still fits me perfectly after all these years. Let's see. Yeah, look at that. I haven't gotten fat over all these years. Oh, look at this. That was our old logo. I remember you hated that. At that time, in 1978, 79, we were the Brightwood Blazers. You were really questioning about the appropriateness of our nickname, because you told us it was like two burning logs, and that's what our school logo was. It was, I guess that's why they changed it later to the Bengals. Oh. But I was also on that consumer project that you organized for us, and we'd go down to the grocery stores and check the prices on all sorts of different items every week, and then report back the totals to see which of the neighborhood markets near Brightwood was least expensive and which one was most expensive. And we put out newsletters telling our results. And at the end of the year, you got some of us kids on TV to talk about the project. So it was my one time on TV, and I was there with Julie Calgucci and Yuki Tam and Karen Marmoto. And I haven't been on TV since then, but today, right now, is the closest that I'll probably ever get. So, and there was an incident though. When I was in the 7th grade, I was hanging out with my cousins, and we were talking, and they said, "Hey, John, if you were stranded on a desert island, who'd you want to be stranded with?" And I said, "Oh, that's easy, Mr. Glick." And my cousin said, "Who's Mr. Glick?" And I said, "He's my 7th grade science teacher." And I knew you were the right choice because you were really smart, and I figured you could build a radio out of a coconut and get us saved. My cousins were not impressed, and they haven't let me live that down over the last 43 years. So after high school and college, you invited me to come back and be a guest speaker in your classroom several times. And I was really honored to do that. You told us that you wanted us to talk about career, education, about Brightwood back in the day, and to give students the secret to success. And it made me think about that question. And what I ended up telling your students was hard work plus kindness equals happiness. And I can stand by that. I was really honored to come and talk to your class, and it meant a lot to me. Years later still, we worked together on PTA when I was a parent at Brightwood, and you were our faculty liaison officer. There weren't a lot of teachers at Brightwood who wanted to stay for 4 or 5 hours after school ended until a PTA meeting started. But you were willing to do that. And it wasn't just staying for the meetings. You were really active in all of our activities. And there were a lot, like college night and career night, talent show, the science festival, which kids always love, and East-West Players, getting that theater troupe to come and stage productions with our students. So after our PTA days, when I finally learned to stop calling you Mr. Glick and started calling you Barry, we still stayed in touch, mostly through letters, then emails, and finally I got to visit you in North Carolina, and you showed me around, and you even invited me to be a guest in your home, and I stayed in the Victor Lee guest suite, which I know was a real honor. Barry, you've always had encouraging words for me over all these years. You've never stopped being my teacher and supporter, and although you packed 10 lifetimes of achievements into your career and your family and friends, those relationships, it was all done in just one life, and you left us too soon. I love you and I miss you. Thanks for always being there. John Haddam, class of 1979.
Colin Yee, class of 2007. Mr. Glick, thank you so much for all that you did for us. I remember just going to the opera, listening to classical music, writing in the blue books. You taught us so much, and you had such a huge impact on all of our lives. We miss you, and again, yes, just thank you for giving that passion and that love for life over to us. We love you.
Hello, my name is Victor Lee, Brightwood class of 1980, and have had the privilege of knowing Mr. Glick for over 40 years. Mr. Glick was one of 4 teachers in my academic journey who stood out as having the most influence on my life. Yes, he was a great instructor in the classroom and helped me build my learning foundation that would carry me through high school and college. As many of the other speakers have already attested, he had very high expectations. He also applied a high degree of caring for his students, sacrificing much of his personal time for us. I still remember his annual project assignment. I selected computers for my topic, at the time a fairly new concept outside of academic, government, and large corporate settings. I learned a lot about myself while working on that project. 1, my research skills needed serious upgrading. More importantly, I discovered my interest in technology. Working with Mr. Glick on that project sowed the seeds to what would later become a 30-plus year high technology sales and marketing career. Mr. Glick was one of the few teachers who regularly interacted with his students outside of the classroom. Who can forget the Friday morning gatherings at McDonald's or dropping by his classroom after school to just talk? He was also the faculty advisor for several school activities, most notably the Honor and Safety Patrols. My time with the Safety and later the Honor Patrol taught me to appreciate public service and giving back to the community. My parents also had a lot of respect for Mr. Glick. During my time at Brightwood, his consumer project teams were well known, not only at Brightwood, but also with the local NBC affiliate in LA, where several of the projects were featured. I was part of the consumer project team that researched arcade games. I remember going to my dad and asking for a roll of quarters so I could go to the local arcade to conduct my research on the games, playing them and then completing the research forms. My dad was very skeptical about my request for quarters to play video games, but when I told him this was a project for Mr. Glick, he thought about it and said if Mr. Glick said it was okay, then it was okay with him. By the way, the local NBC affiliate declined our project for their consumer segment. They told Mr. Glick they weren't convinced that video games weren't more than a passing fad. So I guess Mr. Glick was a visionary too. My most memorable experience growing up with Mr. Glick was being part of the Europe tour group in 1981. Prior to that summer, my travel was limited to a few trips to the Bay Area, San Diego, and Las Vegas. Now, we were on a 9-month planning process to the great cities of Europe, Paris, Munich, Salzburg, Vienna, and more. That trip helped me discover my love of travel. I also got to really know Mr. Glick on that trip. He shared his love of life, music, and art with us, and showed that he was a true Renaissance man. When the century turned, Mr. Glick became Barry. We would have semi-regular phone conversations, usually about technology trends, teaching, politics, and travel, usually his latest planned European trip with Jeannie. I made it a point to call him from different countries during my travels outside the US. One day, he told me he was retiring from Brightwood and wanted me to meet his final class. He had hosted periodic career days where he had alumni return to talk about their professional lives. He invited me to come talk to his class about my technology career. He reminded me about my annual project subject on computers. I was surprised that he remembered. He asked if I remembered what grade I received. I responded to the class that I am proof that you can get a less than the desirable grade on the annual project and still go on to have a long career in that subject. We also connected one last time in Europe. During his final Brightwood trip in 2007, I took a break from a business trip to meet his group in Salzburg, the city where we spent 2 weeks during our 1981 trip. It brought back fond memories. It was great spending time with Barry and Jeannie and exploring some of the same sites from that 1981 trip, sharing memories and watching as he bestowed his love of travel to this final group of students. When Barry and Jeannie moved to North Carolina, we continued to stay connected. I even made it out for a couple of visits. Barry would tell others that I was the first to occupy their guest room. We developed more of a regular pattern of text messages and semi-monthly calls, always on major holidays. I looked forward to the Christmas cards and birthday texts and sending him his annual Pete's Christmas package, one of the things he missed about California. I can also count on calls whenever he got a new phone or a computer. He and Jeannie came out to the Bay Area 5 years ago when Susan relocated for her work. We were able to visit and they met my then 3-year-old daughter, Juliana. They had a great time. I hope one day Juliana will be able to find a teacher like Mr. Glick. For a retired teacher, Mr. Glick seemed to spend a lot of time in the classroom in North Carolina. He was a substitute teacher at the local district and developed a reputation within the community. Unlike most subs, Barry came to school prepared to teach and not to babysit. He told me he liked the variety of the work, especially when he accepted an assignment for the younger grades. It was hard for me to picture him with a class full of kindergartners. We would compare notes because I was a classroom volunteer at my daughter's school where I taught a social-emotional curriculum. Barry inspired me to spend time in the classroom, to share my experiences with the kids with the hope of inspiring them to reach outside of themselves and their neighborhood, just like he did for us. I will miss those talks and the texts. This will be the first time in over a decade that the Pete's gift pack will not be sent. I will continue to think about Barry whenever I prepare for class, when I work on a new technology project, and whenever I'm traveling in a different country. He planted many of those seeds in me. I will continue to nurture them and pass them along. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you so much, all three of you. We're now going to see a video montage of memories created by Bill Yee. And the music you hear playing underneath is Mr. Glick playing Amazing Grace on his clarinet.
I dedicate Amazing Grace to Brightwood. May this song give us all a sense of faith and hope.
I tell you, I can't get over those pictures of Mr. Glick without the mustache. I know he was a child at that point, but somehow I just kind of pictured, I thought he was born with the mustache. We have another group of tributes coming up. I'd like to introduce the speakers. First, Derek Yee. Derek was a Brightwood grad of class of 2000 and is a true disciple of Mr. Glick, who was greatly impacted by his teachings. Derek was on honor patrol and safety patrol and helped chaperone one of Mr. Glick's Europe trips. He currently works as the office manager at his family's nursery and is the associate pastor at Bethany Congregational Church in Santa Barbara. Next will be Maya Villa. Maya is from the Brightwood class of 2007. She was leader of Team Quebec back in Mr. Glick's class and played Holly Day in his directed Christmas musical, Holly and the Ivy League. Today, Maya is the grants manager at the nationwide nonprofit Coach Art, which provides a free arts and athletics community to families impacted by childhood chronic illness. She continues to act in comedy and community theaters. And finally, we will hear from Garrett Hara, a Brightwood graduate, class of 2006. Garrett earned a BS and MS in mechanical engineering from Stanford University. He currently works for PayPal doing computer coding.
My name is Garrett Hara, and I was in Mr. Glick's class from 2004 to 2005. And I'd like to start by telling a story of how I was at a bar in LA, randomly talking to someone who I also found out went to Brightwood Elementary School. And it was amazing, but for the next half an hour, we spent the entire time talking about Mr. Glick and his class. We talked about competing for those esteemed discs and memorizing the absolutely most minute details for that week's history chapter. That glorious moment when you finally join the disc club and you have your music playing to celebrate the moment. Listening to opera in his class, we were both remarking on how lost Mr. Glick gets to the music when he turns it on. Just the pure passion you can see in his face. And then how snappy he also got anytime anyone showed any kind of disrespect. It was always, quiet down, bunch of clowns. And yeah, just when we think of Brightwood, we think a lot about Mr. Glick and the experiences he gave us. It was so different from any schooling that I've ever had, even up through college, and I'm so grateful for it. Mr. Glick had this passion for history, and he had discovered ways to show people how history could come alive and really why it matters. You know, doing current events as a news broadcaster, it kind of felt silly at the time, especially when I was printing out slides on that clear projector paper the morning of the due date. But that was definitely a gateway for me to start paying attention to the news and to the world around me. And to this day, no one really can believe me that I was able to experience a 3-week Europe trip hosted by my middle school teacher. I mean, he showed us how history shaped the Europe we know today. He exposed us to a variety of different cultures and also taught us how to respect different etiquettes. I mean, we had a whole class just on learning how to behave in a fine dining experience. I can't express how thankful I am for all the experiences that he gave me. And I can only hope that someday my kids will be fortunate enough to have a teacher as dedicated and as inspiring as Barry Glick.
Derek E., class of 2000, thank you, Mr. Glick, for the influence you had on our lives.
On the first day of class in 7th grade, Mr. Glick told us all, "I'm not going to give you the social science coloring book." I was terrified. Am I going to fail? Am I going to fail? Whether you aced the quizzes on Wednesday mornings or you're just giggling to yourself on Fridays as Mr. Glick's feet swung as he relished in classical music, everyone knows that he gave us a rich, culturally rich history experience. And for that, I'm forever grateful. Thank you, Mr. Glick.
You've heard some of our speakers talk about the Europe trips, and Mr. Glick was well known for hosting these. They included students from all over the Alhambra School District. So now let's see a video of some of those past Europe trips.
We're trying to use the term this year, an unfair advantage. Now, what do I mean by an unfair advantage? About 6 years ago, I was teaching the kids at Brightwood The Tale of Two Cities, which was a Charles Dickens book. And the high school teachers complained that as a 7th grade teacher, that number one, it was too difficult for 7th graders. Number two, I was incapable of teaching it properly. And they wanted it stopped. And I remember my reaction, I was furious. And I said to them that not only did I want them to come and watch me teach it, but I wanted them to observe me at any time they want, unannounced, and then judge to me if I'm incapable of teaching it. Well, they realized that was a dangerous thing to say about another teacher. So they went back, and a week later they said, well, we don't want you to teach it because you're giving your children an unfair advantage. Well, if that's what I'm doing, great. So this trip, I hope, will give them an unfair advantage.
Now I'm happy to introduce Scott Hara. This is Garrett's dad. We heard from Garrett just a few moments ago. Scott's a Brightwood parent, and he served in the Brightwood PTA as both president and vice president of programs from 1998 to 2006. During that time, he and Mr. Glick created and initiated many programs together. Scott has also been active in the Mark Keppel High School PTSA from 2007 to the present, and as Scoutmaster of Troop 329 at Brightwood from 2003 to 2010 and 2014 to the present.
Thank you, Richard. You know, I worked with Barry through the PTA for 8 years and all the way up to his retirement. You know, Barry believed in PTA and he encouraged parent initiative. He volunteered to be the teacher advisor of all activities he thought promoted student learning, participation, good citizenship in class, critical thinking, creativity, leadership, and planning. Little did he know that his inspiration led to the creation or restarting of several programs, many of which are the core of the current Brightwood PTA 15 years later. Some of the things we did were Magic Night. We had a free night where families can enjoy a professional magician and classes could fundraise by selling dinners and snacks. Then we created Movie Night, a free night for families to enjoy new movies and for classes to fundraise. This program, which was created actually by John Haddam, was so successful that every elementary school in the district adopted it. College Night, remember that one? Parents still recruit guest speakers, including once getting Stanford admissions. Science Festival, where the upper grade students choose among several projects and compete to perform the best. And the talent show, which will be spoken about by Bob Ginn. You know, those are the ones that we still do at Brightwood today. But we had several programs we did and that we're just equally proud of. One was Brightwood Bucks, where PTA supplied bucks for teachers to reward students for whatever reasons they wished, and the students could exchange their bucks for small prizes in our PTA store. Teachers loved that program. We had East-West Players, Educational Performing Arts Grant. We had that for a few years, and it was for 7th graders because Barry was the one willing to sponsor it and be with the students. And the students learned to act and improve their speaking and presentation skills. And Career Night. Most of you old timers must remember this event where students arranged meetings with 3 professionals in a chosen career. You wrote a report on that professional or on that profession. And then you had to make a poster presentation for a PTA night and student assemblies. I know you must remember that one. And this doesn't even include that Barry favorite that some of the speakers talked about on his love of consumer advocacy. And you guys remember when he got you on that program, Fight Back with David Horowitz. Barry's commitment to our Brightwood families required many, many extra hours daily. His dedication, energy, and spirit were rewarded when our parents participated at school in record numbers. Just before Barry retired, we achieved over 100% PTA membership. We had 930 students and 942 members. That has never been done. I don't even think it's ever been done in PTA. Barry was truly a great teacher, and we recognized him with the Golden Oak Award, the most prestigious PTA award in California. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. I'd like to give you a quick reminder that if you'd like to make a pledge during this celebration, please email the glickfund@gmail.com. I'd like to introduce our next 3 speakers. Mr. Kevin Soule, Mr. Glick's counterpart on the 8th grade staff at Brightwood. Kevin taught history and science, and like Barry, he inspired his students to be their best. His many extracurricular activities included trips to Washington, D.C., Catalina Island Marine Institute, and getting Brightwood students to the Los Angeles County Science Fair. Marilyn Takuda served as the first arts education director of East West Players, the longest running professional theater of color in Los Angeles. Marilyn worked together with Barry through the EWP Partners in Education and Arts program. This program provided 7th graders in Mr. Glick's social studies class a foundation in theater techniques, as well as fostered awareness and appreciation of class members' cultural heritage. You know, Mr. Glick loved theater, especially opera, and he shared this passion with his students over the years, and for many of them, it changed their lives. And we will also hear from Bob Jin. Bob's a retired business person who's been very active in his community. He's been married 47 years to his wife, Diane, and has raised 4 daughters, all who attended Brightwood Elementary School. And he currently has 5 grandchildren. He has served on the Alhambra Unified School District Board of Education for 19 years. He's worked with Mr. Glick as a 7th grade and PTA parent volunteer with all 4 of his children, and collaborated with Mr. Glick to continue the talent show and raise money for technology for the school.
A Tribute to Barry Glick by Kevin Soule. I had the honor of teaching at Brightwood for 23 years in the 8th grade. During those memorable years, I also had the privilege of teaching with some incredible people, one of which was Barry. Barry was eclectic, from his dress, always impeccable, his love of the arts, especially opera, to his ability to weave a story from some innocuous incident into something grand or hilarious. He was an interesting character, and I mean that in the most endearing of terms. Although our teaching styles differed greatly, our love for enriching our kids' lives was completely in step. We both shared a love of science and history, and this is where Barry so deeply affected enriching the educational and social growth of our Brightwood kids, and later on while subbing in the lower grades in his retirement years. The outdoor science camps and history-based trips to Europe and Washington, D.C. were 2 perfect examples. It was on the outdoor science camps that the other Barry was revealed to me. I knew Barry was funny, but did not realize how funny he was until he was out of the school setting. We'd share stories of his early teaching days in Brooklyn that had me in stitches. I laugh now as I remember our first trip to Simi, Barry in the waters of Cherry Cove in our wetsuits, snorkel masks, and fins. We each had a group of kids, and all of us were snorkeling in the cove, and all were going in the same general direction. All of us except Barry. Barry was snorkeling out to the open ocean. I signaled to our Simi instructors that I would go get him. I swam over to him asking if he was going back to Palos Verdes on his own, and he said, "Kevin, I can't see a thing without my glasses." But there he was, blind but totally enjoying his first snorkeling adventure and laughing about it afterwards. He so enjoyed those outdoor science camps that he actually ordered a prescription pair of lenses for his customized diving mask ready for our future Simi trips. From our days of Brightwood's 7th and 8th grade softball teams, Barry was our ump, punctuating in his Brooklyn accent, safe or out of there, youth fairs, PTA talent night, and his clarinet, open house, and the 8th grade bake sale supporting scholarships for the science camps, or just hanging in the teacher's lounge, Barry always shined. I was not surprised at all to hear that he subbed in the lower grades because Barry could connect with everyone and make the impossible possible. He was one of a kind, and I will greatly miss him.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Tokuda. I was the Arts Education Director of East West Players for many years. We had a program called PEAK, Partners in Education and an Arts Collaboration, which we would offer to the schools for free. And as great as that sounds, however, it was not always an easy sell to the teachers because, of course, it was extending their time at school. However, Mr. Glick was an exception. He always was so grateful and welcomed us with open arms. And he found such great joy in the performing arts, which I just loved. I remember looking at him once, and a couple of our actors had come to do monologues for the students, and he had this huge, just beautiful smile on his face, which immediately made me feel so good. He was an inspiration to everyone, not only to myself, but to his students. His students loved him. He will always be, I will always think of him fondly.
Hi, my name is Bob Jin. I'm a parent. I was a parent at Brightwood Elementary School, and also I'm on the Board of Education for the Alumni Unified School District. I've known Barry for since my oldest one had him, and I have 4 daughters. In fact, they all had Barry as a 7th grade teacher, and each of them all had a different experience with him. But I always remember that, you know, he always worked our kids hard. Some of my daughters had difficulties with his class, but you know, they all survived and went on to do good things. I always remember that as a parent, that when he had back to school night, I was talking to him one day, and I says, "Hey, let's light up your room and put Christmas lights all over." He goes, "Okay, Bob, let's do it." So I went home one day and I said, "I'll be back the next," and we lit up his whole classroom for back to school night, and that was fun. The kids got a kick out of it, the parents got a kick out of it, and it was a pleasure working with Barry as a parent and as a member of the Board of Education. As a parent, you know, when I was about to stop doing the talent show, which I did for 9 years, he offered to help me, and you know, he kind of reinvigorated my enthusiasm to do the talent show for another 4 years. But it was a pleasure working with him, and we thought about how we're going to do it, and we worked through a lot of things. We had kids come out and do auditions, rehearsals, and he was there with me after school, working with the kids, and we needed an extra talent, and he goes, "I'll play the clarinet." I said, "Great." So he played the clarinet, and I know sometimes we had a disagreement on talent, but I never tried to exclude any of our kids, you know. And he goes, "Hey, can we build a set?" And I go, "What? Build a set?" So we did that. I think one year I built a set for him for the Christmas winter program at Brightwood, because the 7th grade teachers had to put on that program, and that was a challenge. But you know, he inspired me to really look at doing different types of sets and just making the talent show special and the Christmas programs real special. But I also remember when parents were complaining about Barry and his grading system and how tough he is, and they always tell me, he goes, "He's not fair," and you know, he goes, and I always tell those parents, "Don't worry about it." You know, I think Barry will be a teacher who grades on what the child does, not and grade them as such on projects. When they're doing projects together, they will always remember, he will always remember that what part of the project the kids did and what part of the project kids didn't work on. So, I mean, that was my biggest complaint. I heard from so many parents, and I kind of laugh about it. And in fact, I shared that with him a little bit, and we just kind of talk about it. And he goes, "You know, I just want our kids to be the best." And I remember as being on the Board of Education when he retired, and you guys had that wonderful dinner for him, and it was a special time. And I had a chance to talk to him when he came back from after he moved to North Carolina, and he came back to visit because of his commitment to the reserve. And he shared with me that I feel so appreciative of our kids in the Alhambra Unified School District. I appreciate the district and all they do for students. Because as you know, that he was a substitute teacher back in North Carolina after he retired, which I says, Barry, you really wanted to do that, huh? He goes, yeah, because he missed it. He missed working with kids, and he wanted to inspire kids. And you know, I really appreciate hearing him saying that. You know, I think when he tells me stories about that, it's inspired me to be a better school board member and the things that we need to do for our students, and really work at it. And he was a great teacher. You know, we all think about all the trouble times that he's given our kids, but you know, he's always been fair in other aspects. And you know, I also remember a time we decided to do something to raise money for our computers, to buy computers at Brightwood School, and we talk about having a combination teacher-parent type event where we could raise, you know, $6,000 or $7,000 for our school. And we talked about that back in, I think it was in 92, we started discussing it, and then in 93 we did a event over at the Biltmore where we had the PTA and the teachers got together and had a nice event. We raised about little over $7,000 that day, and we did it for a couple of years until I retired from doing it. But you know, I always appreciated Barry for really giving that uplift talk, that inspirational talk that would motivate me into working for kids and continue to do the things that we needed to do for our students and teachers at Brightwood. So, and I just wanted to thank you for giving me this time to say, Barry, thank you. Thank you for all you do.
Some of you have heard talk of the Disc Club. This was something that was after my time, but let's find out what it was, because it was another thing that Barry sort of invented to keep students competitive and involved and interested. This description of the Disc Club is given by Ken Chang. Ken was a Brightwood class of 1986 graduate, and in his words, here's how he describes it. In both science and social studies, anybody who scored at least 4 out of 5 on the chapter view quiz were invited into the contest. Everyone in the contest stood in front of the room with an index card and a pen. This sounds very much like Mr. Glick. This was the homework dirge. This is the music that would play. So Mr. Glick would then ask a series of increasingly precise and detailed questions pertaining to the chapter recently completed in a kind of elimination derby. Then the final 3 contestants, who would be bronze, silver, and gold, would earn an orange disc sticker with a suitable colored star, and they would affix this on the back of their class notebooks. Students who earned 5 or more discs were honored with membership in the Disc Club. I wish this was going on back in the 70s when I was there. I'd give anything to have one of those discs. All right. Thank you for the music, and thank you for stopping the music. After Mr. Glick retired, he and Jean moved to North Carolina. We're now going to hear from Mike Daly, a friend of Barry's from North Carolina. Mike and Barry worked together in Alexandria, Virginia at the Headquarters Artillery Command. They shared many similar interests and experiences, including working for the government, respect for educators, and a love of history.
I was asked to talk about Barry. Barry was my friend, but then most of you would call him your friend. Whether you knew him as the little guy that jogged along the parkway, or maybe the guy that played clarinet, or history with his history club. But me, I met Barry a long time ago, about 400 miles from here, Alexandria, Virginia, in the late 1990s. I knew him then as Colonel Glick. We were at the headquarters of the Army Material Command, and he came up there on his reserve duty, worked in the Public Affairs office. I was down in the engineering office, but the Material Command was reorganizing as it did every 3 to 5 years, and my duties included talking to the historian, the protocol, and public affairs about what we're going to do with engineering and what we're going to do with the whole command. And they gave me Barry as my point of contact. He kept me honest. He made sure that I knew whatever I needed to know from those offices, and those offices made sure he got everything he could from me as to what we were going to do. But jump forward 15 years about, I'm retired, and I come down here to Ocean Ridge. I met a little guy named Barry Glick. Took us 2, maybe 3 whole minutes to say, wait a minute, I know you. I remember you. We had a lot to talk about then. We have mutual friends from the office. We had mutual experiences. We could talk about what it's like to work for the government in a big headquarters. A lot of things to talk about. But then I also learned that he was an educator. I too tried that way back in the 80s for a few years. But we both had the same passion and respect for the education system. And again, we had a lot to talk about. And we did over the years. I think maybe when I first met Barry was with the Ocean Ridge Singers. He was a clarinet player. Beautiful clarinet player. I don't know that that many of you knew that. I remember one show though. Barry was going to do a folk song of some sort. I think he said it was from his father's homeland. He came out on the stage. His eyes were sparkling. His smile was lighting up the stage. And he started playing. You should have seen him. Dancing around, doing a little jig. It just stole the show. We all fell in love with him, and we tried to get him back for as many years as we could. But Barry was good with the clarinet, and he found a number of musicians. I think most of them were from the Southport area, and he started playing with them, and we never could book him after about the 2 or 3 years of him playing with them. He was just too popular. But besides the music side of Barry, there's the history side. I think maybe when I met him with the Singers, he said, yeah, come on to a history club. We just started it. He and Bob Hathaway thought, hey, we ought to talk about history. They both loved history. Barry especially loved history. And so for the next 10, 11 years, there were 11 meetings a year where we talked about history. Sometimes Barry talked. Quite often he got one of you out there to give us something on a subject. We all loved it. I think we were the envy of a bunch of other plantations because we had something they didn't have. We had a historian and a lover of history. The crowds grew, and then the pandemic set, and we haven't had one since. Let's hope somehow we can revive it. But in the meantime, I think we all loved Barry Glick. All of us that knew him, whether we're running on the parkway again, whether we're listening to music, looking at history, whichever. We know we will never forget Barry Glick. I know I don't. I know none of you will either. Thank you.
Oh my God, he was so good. That was amazing. I'm so glad we got to see that. Now I'd like to introduce Mike and Brianna Anninger. Mike is Gene's son, and Brianna is his lovely wife of 9 years. Mike was inspired and encouraged by Barry, and he completed 14 years of active duty in the U.S. Army. He's currently an E5 sergeant for the National Guard.
Hello, my name is Mike Anninger, and this is my wife, Brianna.
Hi.
And Barry was a very, very influential father figure in my life. He gave me very good purpose, very good direction, and he knew how to lead by example in ways for me, two specific ways for me that were very, very important in my life. One of them is being a very good military leader, and he gave me very good purpose and direction in bringing me and introducing me to the military, which originally I didn't think I was gonna like, but the more he encouraged, the more he showed it, it really, really showed me how to be a good soldier and a very good leader. But something else he did, which I did not expect ever, was he really showed me how to love. And he did not do this by just saying, okay, here are the things you do. He showed it. He showed it. And nothing could have prepared me for that, in how he loved my mother and how he showed that love, and he really taught me how to love, and he could not have been such a better teacher for that.
Wow. So I had the honor of having Barry as my father-in-law for almost 9 years, and he just was a very special person for me. The most influential thing I could say about Barry is that he just cared. Before the last time that I had my interaction with him is I had a wedding that I had to do because I do makeup, and I was so excited to call Jean and tell her about it. Well, she was busy, and so Barry was like, "You can tell me," and it was just so special because he just genuinely cared. He just wanted to know how it went, how everybody was, and everything like that. And so that for me was just a special time that I will always remember. And we teared up, but he just was very special. Everything that he did, he cared.
Yeah, he did. He was very, very special to us, and we thank you for everything that he has done for us.
Yeah. And we'll always carry on his memory.
Always.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
That was great. Now, let's take a look at a video that reminds us of the wonderful years Jean and Barry spent together. They met in 1992 and married in 1994. The music being played is Shigalita Menina from La Boheme, and it was one of Barry's favorite arias. And now I'd like to introduce Jean's daughter, Susan Morton.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us. A few things to say. I've thought a lot about how to remember Barry over the last few months. His love of a clean car and his love of very strong coffee, probably from Pete's. Fundamentally, I will remember a person whose life was defined by love of and service to others. Barry was there at the happiest and hardest points of my life. He treated me as a daughter, and for that, I am very grateful. And now I'd like to say a few things on behalf of my mother. I want to thank everyone that planned, participated, and donated to this Barry Glick celebration of life. My mother is confident that Barry is looking down on all of us, feeling both undeserving as well as honored. Barry went to work every day hoping to reach just one student. Based on today, I think he succeeded many times over. Barry was a kind, perhaps a side he didn't show many of you in the 7th grade, generous, dedicated, and the most loving man my mother has ever known. She constantly says she was blessed to have him in her life for almost 29 years. To you, his 7th grade students, Jean would like you to know that he loved you all, that he wanted each of you to succeed in whatever career you chose and simply be the best you can be. Sounds like Barry in the Army. Barry is the love of my mother's life, her dearest friend and her jewel. She repeatedly tells me that Barry will be in her heart and soul forever. Thank you.
As a final reflection, let's take a look at written tributes from students as posted on Facebook, some emails, and legacy.com. Scott Hara will be joining us again to introduce and discuss the Glick Fund. I would ask you all to consider donating to this as a way of remembering Barry and all the work he did and what he meant to all of us.
Thanks, Richard. You know, Barry Glick left a profound legacy of successful Brightwood alumni, ages 28 to 63. You know, many PTA programs he sponsored are still paying big dividends to our current students. So he's had an effect for all these years, even more than the 36. Several of us Barry devotees created a Barry Glick Memorial Fund. And thanks to the Alhambra Education Foundation, we can offer a secure, tax-deductible, volunteer-based, and low-cost way to administer the funds. And if your company has matching grants, Please make sure that when you give it to the AEF that you specify that it goes to the Barry Glick Memorial Fund. So let's go to the first slide, and we're gonna show that as of yesterday, we are at $11,400. Yay! Okay, we're hoping to earn $25,000 during this initial fund and $50,000 the first year. So please ask all your friends to watch this celebration of life and to give to this fund. You know, the mission statement of our education fund is to provide funds to Brightwood Elementary School and its students through educational programs that challenge and reach all students by encouraging curiosity, critical thinking, leadership, activism as inspired by Barry Glick. Barry did that with all of you students. I can just tell by listening to all of the everyone's presentations and all of their words. You know, Brightwood teachers, administrative staff, and teachers will be encouraged to submit grant applications to accomplish unbudgeted activities in the arts, history, sciences, leadership, and other areas of learning that meet fund criteria. You know, things like field trips and special assemblies or teacher and parent inspired programs. You know, those are things that a lot of you students, or when you were students, took for granted. And a lot of that is unbudgeted now. So our current students don't get a lot of those things. So we're hoping to bring those back and in using Barry's Memorial Fund. We hope to develop our funding program and start accepting applications later this year and award our first grants for the use during spring semester 2022. Okay, next slide. All right. Listing donation levels by military rank is pretty fitting for Barry. This slide shows the number of donations that we've received and the ranks of those. And I was just amazed. I said, wow, we have a lot of colonels and even a brigadier general. So please give. Okay, next slide. All right, we want to thank those who've already donated to Barry's Memorial Fund. You probably see familiar names of alumni and parents who have donated. Many of you have said that Barry was your toughest teacher, even including college. You know, he taught much more than a subject. He taught you to be detail-oriented, disciplined, respectful, organized, and he was caring. And he also taught being a team players. You know, these are qualities and habits that give, you know, that enhanced all of your lives. You're here today because Barry impacted you in some way. So I ask that once our program is over, please go over to the Barry Glick donation site and give whatever you can afford and continue Barry's legacy to Brightwood. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I was lucky to be in attendance, excuse me, at Mr. Glick's retirement luncheon in 2006. Anyone who was there remembers Barry's final speech. It was pretty special. And if you weren't there, or you'd like to see it again, here it is.
Remember these things that I said. Number one, teaching was never a job to me. It was never what I do. It was what I am. And you know, and I'll end it off this way. It's very emotional. You know, Shakespeare said we all got our roles. You know, life is a stage. And we all perform on it. We all have, life's a stage, we have our different roles, we have our exits and our entrances. And to me, this was the greatest role of my life. And I can only say this, that this day, of course, will be remembered forever. There can be no other day in the life of any teacher that's sitting in this room or any teacher that's in the profession. This is the ultimate paycheck, and I think you're aware of it. And you know, when time comes, when the end comes for all of us, you know, I always used to tell the Twilight Zone stories. That was always my favorite. And I'll just end off with this. I know when what do they call it, the great night comes, when there is no dawn. I had this image, and maybe Rod Serling, but I'd be laying in bed, and then all of a sudden, there'd be this tremendous heat, this tremendous light, and I know I'm going to be back on the playground. And it's going to be that warm September day. I think it was September 7th, and that wind's going to be blowing in my long hair. And I'm going to look down and see those two-tone shoes and those bell-bottoms, my flowery corduroy jacket. And I reach in, pick up my keys, which had a black whistle on it, you know, and remember. And look at those kids staring at me. Take a deep breath and enter my heaven. Thanks.
I want to thank you all so much for being here and taking the time today to remember Barry Glick. Excuse me. It means so much to his friends and his family, and I know it would mean so much to him too. Thank you once again for being here. Have a wonderful day.